so much of our movement patterns, our eating patterns, we overlook the psychology behind it. We just sort of get 30-day plan and we go for it. And then we wonder, why can't we follow through on it? And when we're psychologically inflexible, we're also avoiding discomfort.
There's a lot of different types of movement that can meet some of these needs. And there's a lot of different ways of distributing this movement. Because if you have this inkling thought that it doesn't count, then how are you going to do it?
To me, that's sort of one of 1,000 examples of psychological flexibility, especially in this fitness space, of just saying, hey, I can do something for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, or I can do 5 times 10 minutes throughout my entire day, and that all counts. But that really is an extreme mind shift for people.
And these 6 processes of psychological flexibility have been shown to be the primary skills that are needed to make behavioral change happen and for it to be sustainable.
Katy and Diana, welcome to the Ready State podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Okay.
Yeah,
set this up. I'm going to jump right in here because everyone knows that I'm a Katy Bowman fan.
Yeah, and this is your second appearance on the Ready State podcast, which we haven't had a lot of double headers, so thank you for being here twice.
Rarefied movement nerd air.
Thank you.
And Dr. Hill, I have been recently feeling like that if I had to do it all over again, I would become a sports psychologist. Performance psychology, talking about how to have people believe in themselves, have resilience. And in this generation, in this time, we are drowning in tools and tactics. And yet somehow there's still all of these barriers to getting people to think differently about moving their bodies. And I am so thrilled to talk about your new book today. So, this is the perfect mashup of the things that I'm living right now, public health and the performance mindset of how do I come to shake all my family's beliefs about movement and my body so that I can go enjoy myself and be a member of my community.
Fabulous. Well, I think so much of our movement patterns, our eating patterns, we overlook the psychology behind it. We just sort of get the 30-day plan and we go for it. And then we wonder, why can't we follow through on it? So that's what this book is all about. And it's been such a pleasure to join with Katy because she has all the biomechanical, nutritious movement angle. And then I take the psychological angle, and it's a perfect pairing when you have the two in your back pocket.
So that leads me to my next question. Before we start talking about the brass tacks of this book, I'd love to hear a little bit about your partnership. How do you all know each other? What made you come together to write this book, and now, for either one of you?
Well, Diana, I think, had been following nutritious movement right after she had had a baby, and I think a lifelong exerciser.
Yeah, lifelong exerciser, and couldn't do it in the same way that I used to do it when I had a toddler and a newborn.
And so she was incorporating these ideas, came to a live event, and like you, Kelly, I actually took quite a bit of sports psychology, but performance psychology is a little bit different than what we would now call fitness psychology. The idea of it's not necessarily about pushing yourself past what you're already doing. It's well, I guess it is, except what you're doing right now is maybe not moving as much. So you're still having to overcome the either physical or the internal barriers to movement. And I had not really explored it for a long time. And then Diana and I were talking, and she was just so fast with suggestions for here's a question I keep getting. My big question that I had for her personally was, little kids move so well with their older, they're adults, but then you get into that preteen time and teen time, it starts to fall off. And she had such good practical advice for me, which I love, practical advice. Was maybe they don't need to come onto your page. Maybe you need to get onto their page, or maybe you need a new page of movement. And it was just so helpful. I had her on my podcast, and she just time and time again had these really simple tools that made it easier for me to overcome these barriers. And then I was like, we need to not only do a book together, the book should be super practical, where it's just, what are 45, 44 actual scenarios that people cannot go through, and let's just troubleshoot them one at a time. You would be getting coaching, and then let's put them together in a book that people can use sort of as a field guide to their lack of motivation that day.
But we wanted it also to be really complex and individualized, like the way that someone would come into your practice, into my practice. They don't say things like, oh, how do I set up my exercise plan for the next week? they say things like, I have kids and I have a busy job and I want to get my teenager on board with me. How do I do that? It's getting in the way of my movement. So the questions that we have and we answer in this book are real questions from real people, from our audience. But then I go at it from this model of psychological flexibility, which is yes, it's simple to apply, but it's actually a quite complex model. It's the sort of cutting edge of psychological science right now in terms of our understanding of psychological barriers to anything, psychological barriers to flexibility in your relationships. But now we're applying it to movement. And this is really the first thing out there that's like that, that's using this advanced psychology in this way.
We
So cool.
always are thinking we want to use high performance models, high performance environments to understand what's essential, to really so that and transmute those lessons into things that are actionable for my family, in my community, my household. So that sport isn't just circus. And certainly what's really interesting about this is that I picked this up and I literally was like, come on, right? Like my hardcore cis hetero male self, I was like, I motivate, I go to the gym, I'm a bro, we bench. And I dog-eared at least 10 things. I was like, oh, that's me, that's my friends, that's it. And I think this is so important, again, with the mindset that I'm working alongside in performance environments with people who are struggling to overcome depression, self-doubt. I had 4 really intense body composition conversations with some of the best athletes in America at a college recently. And, this is really the heart and soul of getting to a healthier community and to have a family and a household that likes to move and enjoys moving and isn't just like, hey, I'm doing my clinical prescription of taking my daily dose of exercise. Like Juliet and I have come to believe that we have sucked the joy out of moving our bodies. We have made it so clinical and so just about being shredded on Instagram that people have lost their minds of what the whole point of moving our DNA is. There's the callback, so that we can have a better society and better families.
Well, and I think you can even take that concept of performance and be like, sometimes in the day when I was in school, I think performance and optimizing performance meant eschewing all the other domains of your life so that you could just kick ass
Right.
and
You could,
and be and be high performance. But performance is really across all domains of your life. It's sort of like much more of an ecological approach. And when we wrote this book, I mean, yes, the cover of the book has like a treadmill covered with laundry, and you're going, that's not me. I have no problem getting myself onto the treadmill every day. But then we're really asking, like, how well are you distributing movement throughout your life? How well is movement distributed throughout your community time and throughout your family time and your work time and your nature time? And to me, that is a more 360-degree definition of performance.
love it.
I like that.
I
like that.
Can I jump in just real quick?
Yeah, sure.
You said an ecological approach. And what I will tell you is that the longer Juliet and I are working with people, the more we have to evaluate their beliefs about exercise, their beliefs about nutrition, their families, practice, the learning that they've done.
Right,
Plus,
the environment.
Are they going outside? Do they play? In our new program, we've actually had to prescribe play for adults. We're like, you don't actually play. The treadmill is the shittiest form of play there is. Like if you're going to call it play, I mean, that's pretty austere. And I really recently we heard one of our favorite sprinting coaches on a well-known podcast, and he was saying, hey, we should stop thinking about the body in any other way than through, like, we're biologists. We're curious about how this organism, this vital, crazy, amazing, dynamic organism exists and relates to the environment and the people around it.
Well, I would say play and community. Community is the other one. I just mentioned that I was moving yesterday. So my whole exercise program is not on program, when your weights are somewhere, everything is somewhere. And so I called up my friends, or I texted my friends, my group text, and said, I'm moving. I need help. Who can be here at 6:30 in the morning tomorrow to do some HIIT training? And because I moved three doors down, I had
Which are the hardest moves,
They're
by the way.
hard.
Moving close is the
but
hardest
not
one.
with friends. because I had friends show up. They got my coffee order on the way, knowing my coffee machine was also in move, right? And they showed up
Oh, Wilford.
and they in an hour's time, I mean, we just like booked it. I was sweaty. I was feeling so much better, feeling the supportive community. I got my weightlifting and my sprinting and all of it done. And I mean, I've trained for it, right? So we do our training for life. But we can also think about life as also another opportunity to move, and how do we put community in our movement? And part of that is looking at the ways in which moving enhances the domains of our life. So how could we add movement to our domains to bring out our values in those domains? And then also how the values we want to bring to our movement. Because now I'm bringing community to my physical activity by asking my friends to join me. So it's really a fresh look at movement when we look at it this, as Katie said, the ecological way, this systemic way, and looking at a systems model.
I think I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. I would just love to dig a little deeper on this concept of psychological flexibility as it relates to movement and exercise in particular. And maybe I'll just flip it on in the sort of the negative. If why does not being psychologically flexible, why is someone who is not psychologically flexible less likely to move?
Well, I think it helps first just to define what psychological flexibility is. It's a
Please.
term that's used in a broader context of something called ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy or training. ACT is used with everything from chronic pain to Olympic athletes. And psychological flexibility means your ability to stay present, engaged, aligned with your values, open, aware, do what matters most in the moment, even when obstacles show up. So when we are psychologically inflexible, we are caught up in our thoughts. We're believing everything our mind tells us, like, I don't want to go to the gym, or everyone's in better shape than me, or this hurts, it's too hard, or all the thought barriers. When we're psychologically inflexible, we are motivated by things that aren't really aligned with what we care about and how we want to show up in the world. So our motivation is off. Like maybe we're just motivated by a certain number, but we don't have a deeper why underneath that number, right? And when we're psychologically inflexible, we're also avoiding discomfort. Like that's our primary, like that's the thing that's pushing us around is, ooh, is that going to be uncomfortable? I don't want to do that. As opposed to being driven, behaviorally driven by what is truly rewarding and values aligned. So inflexibility can be a barrier for all sorts of things in life. Psychological inflexibility will be a barrier at work. It'll be a barrier in your marriage. It'll be a barrier in your parenting, but it does show up also as a barrier in terms of not only establishing long-term, sort of commitment to moving our bodies, but also being flexible as our bodies change. You get injured, you move, you travel, all these things that show up in life. You have bad air quality, whatever it is. How can you continue to move lifelong and be mentally flexible enough to do so?
One of the things I really adore about this book is, as you say, there are 44 sort of hypos in here, and then you start to just deconstruct them. You ask why, and it really is just an interesting set of behaviors to just sort of untangle sort of how people come to be in this place. We view sport, and I'm going to put sport as in movement, sport framework, physicalness, as maybe the last framework for which we can really learn how to care and feed for the human being. We know that if we're going to play sports, we're going to have to talk about sleep. And it's a framework to talk about nutrition and warm up and pain and communication. What I love about this book is that we're just saying, hey, sport is this really incredible framework. Well, let's just go ahead and reapply it to another set of things. Like we can expand the definition of this, of the idea of using sport, using exercise, using play as a model to understand myself so that I can come back and be a little bit more intact. And I just want to give people an example of things that, what I'm talking about. My job is not physical, so my body isn't tired after work, but my brain is so tired, I just can't convince myself to move, despite knowing that if I go even for a short walk or move in some other ways, I feel better and want to do more. I wanted to say that because anyone listening to this isn't about like, hey, I have body dysmorphia necessarily, which is real, but this is also the nuts and bolts of the things that keep people from doing what they need to do. This is real.
Well, and I think everybody can relate to that. I mean, you have kids and you have a busy job and you've come home and cooked dinner and done the homework.
And
then you
should do these things.
Yeah, you should take an after dinner walk or try to motivate to exercise, and you cannot do it. I think there's, everybody listening to that this has had that exact experience.
Yeah. Do you think, let me ask you all this. One of the things that you talk about in here, it says, hey, I don't have a full hour to work out. And this, this is one of the biggest pieces that Juliet and I are trying to deconstruct. We're like, hey, moving snacks are awesome. 10 minutes of workout is amazing. Why is it that we've worked in our head that I can go do this epic hour plus thing or not, or fail? It's like I have to have a 6-course meal for my toddler. Otherwise I'm not a parent chef. You know what I mean? How did we get into this all or nothing, Katy?
Well, this was going to be my example of where I see psychological flexibility really being helpful for the populations that are following us, people who are already kind of, they have regular movement diets, but they don't maybe not show up every single day exactly in the way that they want. Is in their mind, what counts is this box around this 45-minute, 60-minute, whatever session of whatever mode that they love or they really attached. This is exercise. This is what checks that box. And they don't have equal flexibility around other types of movement checking that movement box. So one way to get flexible is to say, first, there's a lot of different types of movement that can meet some of these needs. And there's a lot of different ways of distributing this movement to meet these particular needs. And that's, to me, the first level of psychological flexibility for people to then adhere, to it, or to be able to fit it into their life or to prioritize it. Because if you have this like inkling thought that it doesn't count, then how are you going to do it? If you truly believe that it does not count in the same way that this other thing counts, I think you're just going to keep, it doesn't really.
Yeah, I mean, we have our friend Dave Spitz, who runs Cal Strength out here. He developed this phrase that we love called "never do nothing," which to me seems like a little micro form of psychological flexibility. Right? This guy owns a gym. He trains people for a living. He's got this beautiful, amazing gym, but like so many,
he is an Olympic coach.
yeah, so many entrepreneurs and parents. He got behind and felt like he gained weight and he lost track of his fitness. And he sort of had this realization at one point. And part of that was his realization that he didn't have a whole hour often to exercise. And so he created this phrase, and he's, I think, actually writing a book about it called Never Do Nothing. But we love that because to me, that's sort of one of 1,000 examples of psychological flexibility, especially in this fitness space, of just saying, hey, I can do something for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, or I can do 5 times 10 minutes throughout my entire day, and that all counts. But that really is an extreme mind shift for people.
Well, I would just add that from a psychological perspective, the mind really hates ambiguity. The mind really hates sort of this uncertainty. So it likes to be dichotomous. It likes to say either or. And it likes to put rules around things. And that's very helpful. We can thank our mind for that because rules keep us, sometimes safe. Like that's dangerous. Don't go there ever. But when it comes to movement, those rules can really limit our activity because we think spaces are certain spaces we won't move in because our mind tells us that's not an appropriate place to move. And some of this is our learning history. We get taught it at a very young age, and then we keep those rules from, grade school all the way through, that I need to sit at a desk to study. I mean, who had that rule? Their parent told them or their teacher told them. And now it's like, really sit at a desk? For me, my best ideas come when I'm out running along the beach. I'm like brilliant. And then I come back home and I can't remember anything. Right. So this idea of getting more flexible mentally, cognitive flexibility is something I work on a lot in the book. It's a training, and that we can all do it, but we have to practice it. Just like you practice, strengthening your physical muscles in your body, you can practice strengthening your mind to be more comfortable with ambiguity, to be more comfortable with breaking rules. And those are some of the assignments that we encourage people to do: is write down your exercise rules and then break some of them on purpose. So if you have an exercise rule, if I need to do my HIIT training for 35 minutes because somebody told you at some point it's just stuck in there, why don't you do it for 29 or do it for 45 and see what happens? Nothing will happen. You'll just still be able to exercise, and breaking those rules on purpose will make you a more flexible exerciser so you can exercise your brain.
Are you going to tell the same story about
No.
exercising?
But I just want to say that if this isn't just a handbook for people who are maybe have a barrier to a challenging belief about whether they should move or whether they should move. This is also, if you're a coach, I need you to get this book because it's going to give you a roadmap for literally every reason why people can't do it, won't do it, shouldn't do it, aren't doing it. Really, and to have the next conversation. I just want to point out how important that this is, I think, as a resource, living resource. Like, keep this in your gym, because if you go through here, and as a coach who's been coaching people for a long time, I want you to ask, how many of these have I heard? And more importantly, what was my solution to that? How did I engage with this person to have a next conversation about helping them? And the chances are you're going to fall flat on your face.
Well, excuse me.
Go
Sorry.
ahead. Go
Well,
ahead,
I was just
Katie.
going to say, as movement coaches, I think we keep trying harder with it. Let me just show you one more piece of research of why it's good for you. Like, you're trying to convince them harder that it's good for them. So much of our energy goes into that. And then I think on the flip side of that, the other person is like, wow, I just keep hearing how good it is for me. I must be lazy. So we're stuck in, like, sort of like being in this relationship, and the same arguments keep coming out. It's like, yeah, 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 and the same response, like nothing ever changes. This is our attempt to change the way, if you are not motivated to move, and I'm talking about not just getting your exercise, but move more throughout life in different dynamic ways, it being good for you is not, you don't need to push that button harder. You don't need to ring that doorbell 5 more times. That's not the right portal for motivation for you. And it's not because you're lazy. That's not what's going on. So that's what this tool is all about.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get into the specifics, but we talked about this a little bit in the pre-roll. We are in this era, this, fitness and health information era. There is all the information available, maybe too
Yeah,
much at this
maybe.
point. And I think most people, especially people who are sort of inclined to move, like movers who are probably, following you and following us, are really learning the why. Like, we're learning the why and going deep on the why. We can listen to hours and hours of podcasts about why we need to move and why we need to have certain health practices in our lives, why they're important. We have lay people reading scientific studies about the why, but there still seems to be this gigantic gap. And I know this is exactly what you both are trying to fill in the how do I actually do it? And obviously there's a variety of ways, but before we get it, I loved, you guys, I love how it's 44 reasons that we don't move. I love how practical this is. I have to think in here, there's some heavy hitters. There's some of them that are heavy hitters. I imagine technology is on the list, but can you guys start to actually talk a little bit about some of the specifics of, why are we, what really are the barriers to movement, and sort of like, what are the big ones that are probably common amongst all of us, even if we have sort of different desires to move, different motivations to move?
Well, I'll just say that we organize the 44 reasons into categories, like chapters, so to speak, that are kind of the big heavy hitter collections. They have to do with motivation, they have to do with technology being a big barrier, time. But then I think within those chapters, we don't all run up against the time barrier for the same reason. We're not all running up against the motivation reason for this. Like, they're complex scenarios, but you can sort of see this theme emerge. And then, Diana, what do you want to say about
Yeah,
the
just
heaviest
piggybacking
hitters?
on that, someone may tell you they don't have enough time, but if you dig deeper, for one person, that "I don't have enough time" is really about priorities and not having a deeper reason, like that they're spending a lot of time on other things that they think are more important. And you wanna know what's important to them and see how movement could enhance that. Like, for example, we have someone in there that's a grind. They call themselves a grinder. They just care so much about their work, and so they don't wanna leave their work to go for a walk midday because 'cause they're really into a project, right? And so we have to use that's a motivator for them. How can you go with that resistance and use work as a motivator and get them seeing that actually if you take that walk, you're more creative in your work, or could you bring your work
That's right.
on your walk, right? For somebody else, not having enough time may just be a thought that they have in there, and really they're using their time um, in ways that are sort of not. They're just sort of following the inflexible ideas about movement has to happen in a certain time frame. So you would use a different intervention for that. the way that we address that is we teach these 6 skills. And we have the bonus of self-compassion. And these 6 skills, these 6 processes of psychological flexibility have been shown to be, there's been a lot of research, over 40 years of research on it at this point, been shown to be the primary skills that are needed to make behavioral change happen and for it to be sustainable. So we teach these 6 skills. You as a practitioner, or you as you're working on your own self, have to kind of figure out, what is my underlying barrier? Is it that I'm stuck in my thought? Is that I don't is it that I'm not motivated? Is that I'm avoiding discomfort here? And with each one of those, you'll have a specific skill that you can use to practice, that you can use with it.
And I also think a heavy hitter, you're asking about what are the heavy hitters? I think shame and embarrassment, that chapter
Mhm.
hits hard.
Huge.
But one of
Yeah.
the looking at the questions, I mean, these are real questions. We got a ton of questions and we weeded through all of them. A lot of them were sort of similar. So every question is sort of standing in for maybe 3 or 4 sub questions that we kind of amalgamated into one. But that shame and embarrassment chapter, what I really was schooled by was the range over which shame and embarrassment could occur, because you would have that, like, I've never exercised before, so therefore it's really hard, I feel uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable in my own body, all the way to ex college athletes who feel shame now because to go out and exercise is to admit I am no longer a 20-year-old college athlete. And I
That is one of the ones I've just
Yeah, yeah.
that's
dog
my
tagged
dog
because I
tag.
know so many of those
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
kids.
We know
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
many.
and
Yes.
that's shame too. And I wouldn't have looked at it this way until working with Diana. Like, I just feel like she was able to really pull up these things that everyone will read and just nod along. Yes, that's me. That's me. That I know this person. Like you were saying, Kelly, it's a book that you can really relate to. It has very little to do with whether or not you exercise regularly. It's much deeper than that.
One of the things that you have done beautifully, Katie, over your now 10 books,
Thank you.
congratulations, you crazy
I know.
person, um, is that you really have done probably the most work by separating exercise from movement and helping people understand that, hey, movement is actually how we have a body that can do what it needs to do. And then, and I think of this all the time. At one point, Juliet and I had 3 women in our lives who were over 100 years old, and none of them had jump roped, done high
They'd
intensity
never gone to
exercise,
Peloton.
never gone keto. I mean, like, they literally would drink wine, smoke a little cigarette, and eat a little chocolate donut once in a while. And but they were always engaged in their communities, always in motion, always had meaning and purpose. And I think you've done a really wonderful job of helping people sort of differentiate that. And in there, you do kind of talk about, hey, this book may be just about shifting our mindset a little bit away from, hey, if I'm not going to some high intensity class or I'm dead, then everything else is lost. And you do talk about this. And I just want to call that out a little bit, because if someone has an auntie or an uncle or a framework in here, a lot of the beliefs that they have that are, I'm not an exerciser, could be applied to, hey, maybe I can go out and enjoy moving my body more. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, and I think that that's what Diana said when she first came to talk with me, is you're already sort of doing psychological flexibility just by helping people deconstruct
Yes.
this very stiff concept of what exercise is. You're broadening it to say, well, there's movement and there's physical activity and there's exercise and there's labor, and guess what? They are all changing the geometry of your body. They all go into ultimately what we're trying to do, maybe with exercise, is toggle these cells over here, straighten this fin over here. It's that sort of input. And when you work with a broad range of cultures, you realize we've been getting it done for a long time in a way that doesn't involve the construct of exercise. So let's
That's
let
right.
that like ooze and melt a little bit. Let's let that box soften and get a much more broad, so we can realize that movement actually does fit in, which you two are doing all the time as well, right? You're just saying, here's all these opportunities, and they don't have to be in this rigid box anymore. The box has a purpose. It has a purpose for measure. It has a purpose for tracking. That box is pleasing and motivating to a lot of people, but it is also not pleasing and motivating probably to way more people. So let's not use the tightest, most rigid cookie to put on the platter and be like, don't you want to eat this cookie? And it's just this one flavor, instead of saying there's actually a whole buffet of ways you can get these
That's right.
nutrients.
Dana, tell me, kind of twofold, what surprised you most about writing this book on this topic? And then what was most surprising about working with Katy on this topic?
I think what surprised me most about working on this book was I'm a lifetime long mover exerciser. I'm on the side of too much, not too little. And I really had to sort of relearn my relationship with movement. And that has been in part through Katy and other practices, yoga practice in particular. But what surprised me was how, when you take whatever reason that people are throwing at you, underneath it, there's a common humanity, right? And the common humanity is often things like people generally want to live well. People want to do things in their lives, feel connected, feel like they matter, feel like they're growing at things. And what blocks us is more our what's going on inside of our heads and our avoidance of discomfort. So when we can see that sort of as a frame, we can apply it to all sorts of things, but including moving too much or moving too little, or in my work with Katy, yeah, maybe we're doing our treadmill, but we're not doing our PT exercises, or we're not engaging with our family. Our kids are swimming in the pool, but we don't want to get up and get cold and get wet and throw the ball, right? That's a form of movement that we're avoiding for a certain reason, even if we went to the gym earlier that day. Uh, I think for me, working with Katy was fabulous because she is as flexible and creative in her writing as she is as a person. She midway through this book, Katy went on a 100-mile walk. And I think we studied the thing that we need to learn, right? So I studied psychological flexibility because I'm quite inflexible by nature. And so here's my co-author leaving for a 100-mile walk. I'm like, give me my edits back, Katy. I have a timeline here. And that was really eye-opening to see how our collaboration, she got me a little more flexible around things. I appreciated how she really encouraged me just to answer each question as if I were sitting across from a client, not as in my, I can get a little researchy sometimes, but actually as a human. If they were sitting in my office, what would I say to them? Often it starts with it's understandable that this is hard. It's hard for all of us, right? And that opening door of validation, but then also giving them some real tools, problem solving ideas that are tangible and actionable that they could do when they leave my office. I don't know if I'm ever going to see someone again. And so when they leave my office, I want them to go away feeling like something shifted. And that's how we thought of each and every one of these reasons. Like if you just read this one reason, that's all you got to in this book, you'd get something out of it that you could use and that would maybe shift your life in some way.
This episode of the Ready State Podcast is brought to you by LMNT. And this time we're going to talk to you about sparkling elements.
We're just going to gush about it. So it's starting to get warm.
Yep.
We had a few warm days.
Sprung.
Spring has sprung. One of the things that is amazing is, I think, when you're reaching for a coffee in the afternoon, don't do it. Reach for a sparkling element. When you need a beer, don't do it. Reach for a sparkling element. I think this behavior will profoundly change your life.
When you're like us, and often you've just had coffee for too many hours in the morning, and you realize you're behind from a hydration standpoint, sometimes I'm able to just sort of bump my hydration back up and go back to drinking water by just adding in sort of like a late morning sparkling element.
I don't know if it's because we've been exercising for 1,000 years, but I don't need a drink for an hour. Like, we're training hard on the bike, redlining.
No, like during a workout.
Yeah.
No.
But I will tell you that I've been doing a lot of conditioning lately, getting ready for the summer, and I crack a sparkling element. Am I the only person who can drink a sparkling drink in the middle of like a brutal interval? But I have no problem.
You probably are.
And what I feel like is, oh, hey, I'm getting all the salts I need, and I'm going to continue to stomp this thing because it's tasty. I'm drinking and I'm hydrating. It's amazing.
Yeah, and an ice cold one out of the fridge after your workout or in the afternoon when you just need a little bit of bump is like completely
all the
hits
classic element goodness in a sparkling can. Do me like, it is such a game changer. One of my athletes at a university recently came to me and was like, "Have you had sparkling element?"
And you're like, "Yes, I
was
have."
Like, get in line, lady. Right now, if you order through our link, you can get a free sample pack with all of Element's flavors. And of course, we love to party in our mouths. So that's all about sparkling. Go to drinklmnt.com/TRS today.
We literally drink it every day.
Every day.
This episode of the Ready State Podcast is brought to you by MOMENTOUS.
When we're talking about supplementation, I feel like there's the stack. Like everyone should be on an omega.
The big three, as Jeff
right?
says.
Everyone should be on creatine. And then probably adding in some protein to your diet is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, and I mean, those three supplements are backed by like thousands and thousands of studies showing that they are effective and healthy for you.
Whey protein isolate is the gold standard.
Yep.
Right? We know that. And it's not always the same quality across. But so like good whey protein isolate, low lactose, low heavy metal, easy to digestible. But not only does Momentous protein sort of is it first in class in terms of ingredients.
Yeah. And it's NSF certified.
Right. NSF sport certified, which is important even earlier.
Yep.
But it's so tasty. And I want to just double click on the strawberry protein because it has been life-changing.
Which is part of a suite of new flavors. There's strawberry, chai, chocolate fudge, and chocolate mint.
Yeah, allegedly there's one more secret flavor on TikTok.
All of which are so good, but strawberry is
it's
really
not
hitting
that,
it for us
that
right
fake
now.
strawberry. It is like, I'm like, oh, I actually am looking forward to it. I am a veteran, as I've said before, of the like Weight Gainer 900.
Yeah.
And I get a little queasy when shakes because there's so many ready to drink shakes. This strawberry protein is the best. Momentous doesn't make me feel sick. It is bomber. And if you happen to be a person who does not tolerate dairy, the Momentous vegetarian proteins are so good.
And I would also like to say that I used the new dark fudge in my Ninja Creamy recipe.
Oh, tell me more.
And it was really spectacular. So these new flavors are just adding to what already is such an awesome protein lineup.
If you want to learn more, go to livemomentous.com/TRS and use code TRS for 35% off your first subscription to the tastiest protein in the world. Love it.
So I just did a post in our Starrett System group and about what I think is, honestly, I've come to believe is like maybe the most important skill when it comes to a movement or fitness practice. And at the time I wrote it, I don't think I had this word psychological flexibility, but in my mind, but I think that's what I was talking about. And, what I was trying to say is that, what I see over running a gym for 20 years and working directly with people trying to help them move and keep moving is the ones who are able to really be successful are the ones who, get injured and somehow figure out how to keep moving despite the fact that they're injured, or they do have children and they're willing to say, okay, well, I used to train for marathons and now I'm just going to need to run for 30 minutes on my treadmill because I have a baby. But I really think it's that ability to be flexible enough to say, okay, I used to do X, but now I need to do Y. I'm in a different season of my life. And now, of course, I realize that what that is psychological flexibility, which I think is the most important skill in being able to have a lifelong movement practice.
Let me ask you this, to tag on that. One of the things that we think happens potentially from playing sport is that you're confronted with loss. You have to be flexible, you have to be dynamic. Like it just doesn't go according to plan, right? And have you found that a lot of the questions, there are some questions about, hey, I used to be a college athlete, et cetera. But did you find that there was a split, that some of the people had some training, and I don't mean good training, just some exposure to some of this concept of psychological flexibility, even though they didn't have the language, to people who maybe didn't have a framework for that and have come to a little bit later in life? Because we definitely have friends who are like, I have never exercised a day in my life. It's not my jam. And I'm overwhelmed. Did you find that there was, or is it everything for everyone?
I think that the underlying pieces of the questions can come from people who have zero exposure to movement, who have negative exposure to movement. So negative exposure to movement is its own category, which I think these show up quite a bit. And that can be also through sports, right? I had a bad coach, or I had a parent who punished with movement, or
yeah. I read that one. I was like, oh my God, the burpee. I was like, am I that dad?
making note highlighter. Yeah. And then people who had positive experiences. I think that it kind of runs the gamut. And we didn't actually know, we didn't have any more details. These were just submitted questions. So we couldn't poke and prod. We couldn't ask for context. So in a lot of ways, I think we had to imagine. And, as we were writing, being like, well, if this is the reason why, then, da, 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 da. So I think you get all of it. I
And
think
I
you get
think
all
that
of it.
our mindset isn't in a vacuum of just around movement. Our
Mhm.
mindset, our inflexible mindset, we is part of our upbringing, it's part of our schooling, it's part of
Mhm.
the culture that we're in, it's part of our friends group, and then we apply that mindset to movement, right? So, for example, if one of the skills that we work on a lot with is self-compassion, and there's been over 2,000 randomized controlled trials now about self-compassion as a huge benefit to when if you fall off track on something, you're more likely to get back onto it if you have self-compassion. You're more likely to stick with things long term. And that's not often the mindset that we have around exercise, but also around a whole lot of things, right? We
Mhm.
don't usually speak to ourselves in a way that is encouraging and kind and a tone of voice that is really on our own side. We tend to be a little more critical. We tend to be, especially if we're trying something new or going outside of our comfort zone, that's when we're meanest to ourselves. So these skill sets around exercise are often ones that we're using in other areas of our life too, right? So the way we are with ourselves at work, we're inflexible with certain things around work. The way we are with ourselves around dating, whatever, or parenting, and that's where. Yes, people are different in terms of. I do think that sport, and I have two kids that are mountain bikers. They're both on mountain bike teams. It There's a lot of injury, there's a lot of tackling difficult things. There's so much flexibility that you learn from being an athlete in the right under the right conditions. And then there's also inflexibility that you learn from being an athlete, right? Because you learn about maybe not as much about the process and you're more focused on the outcome rather than enjoying the ride, right? So it applies to sport, but also outside of our lives, I think.
How can people and I love this self-compassion talk, and I guess my question is, how can people develop this skill? Because, I know so many women in particular, this when I'm talking about self-compassion, I think about women and I think about sort of this, like, what may be overstated, like, idea that, women can just handle everything and do everything, and that's the expectation, and what I think is
You all need
underneath.
to stop
I think
handling
what's
everything and doing
underneath
everything.
I think often what's underneath that, though, is sort of this lack of self-compassion and just saying, it's okay if I take a rest day. Like, I'm not going to lose my fitness. Or, I mean, there's 1,000 ways we can express self-compassion, but for people who don't have that as a skill set, it seems to me like you guys are saying it is a skill almost. How do you develop the skill?
Well, in the research, self-compassion is defined as having sort of these three qualities to it. So being kind to yourself, being mindful, being present, acknowledging that something's challenging for you, that's difficult. Self-compassion is different from self-care. Self-compassion, you don't need, bath salts. You can do it in the here and now in this interview. Am I noticing that something's uncomfortable? And am I being kind to myself with that discomfort? And then the third component is common humanity, understanding that everybody struggles sometimes. It's normal, it's human. And you can strengthen that in a lot of different ways. But I also want to say that self-compassion is also, there's a whole, Kristen Neff has written about this, fierce. So there's giving ourselves a chance to rest. And there's also times when you push. And
Hmm.
that fierce side of self-compassion is just as kind, right? So sometimes we need to say, this is hard. My son just,
Mm.
speaking of athletes and mountain bikers, he just broke his wrist mid-move here. He broke his wrist on his bike. And the compassionate thing that he did that I saw him do was when I offered this morning to scoop the avocado out, he said, "Let me try it, Mom. I want to do it because I know you're not going to be here later so that I can learn how to scoop my own avocado." That's actually pushing yourself a little bit, but pushing yourself because it's a kind thing to do for yourself, not because you're pushing yourself to be harsh and critical.
I really love that. And I love that you said self care because for some reason, and I know I'm an aggro person, but I hate the phrase
Yeah.
self care. It like somehow bothers me and feels selfish. And something about it has just
Hey,
never
watch
sat
this.
well
Watch
with
this.
me.
Tell me more about that.
It just, I don't know what it is. It has always bothered me. I see it used often in ways that feel selfish and weird to me. And I love what you're saying about self compassion because it is seems to be striking this balance between being kind to yourself and saying, okay, maybe I need to rest, but maybe I do actually need to push. Maybe that's actually a way of self compassion, which I love that.
I have a question for both of you. I feel like the heart of this book is too late. Like, I'm getting this book as an adult. Like, I have missed a few steps, and it's never too late. Just so we're clear, just it's never too late. Like, this whole point is to become better people, to be better members of our households, better members of community. Like, that's the highest promise of playing, having a body that allows me to do what I want to do. I was just at the American Physical Therapy Association annual convention, and the keynote speaker was a former professor of mine, the dean of my school, and he said the highest calling in physical therapy is to move upstream and remove barriers to people moving in their communities and in their households and their families. Like, that's the highest. Everything else, he's like, is bullshit. It's really about how, as physical therapists, can we say, hey, why is this shoulder pain limiting your ability to move and interact? And I love that this is moving upstream to the greater conversation. What should I do with the people I'm working with, the people I live with, to have this conversation earlier in the process? Because this is really important. But I'm running into all Americans, gold medalists, who I'm like, hey, have you read this book yet? Because you are the best in the world and you suck at this. Like, wouldn't it have been great if? So how can we think about having these conversations maybe a little bit further upstream?
I would say the best way to have the conversation isn't even having the conversation, it's to be the model of it. Um, I think that all the work that I've done with my own becoming more psychologically flexible is what allowed my kid to do that thing with the avocado, right? Because
Mm.
the way in which we, um, make make the biggest change, I think, is we start with ourselves. And we become models of psychological flexibility and movement in the way that Katy has been. When I go to an airport, I'm lifting the bag and going up the stairs, and I'm thinking of Katy the whole time, and my kids are doing it
She's ruined the
too,
airport for
right?
us
Sorry.
all. It's fair.
We're all squatting in our chairs, like she taught me the perch pose on the airplane, where you get into the airplane seat and you get into a little perch position. And
Must be nice,
yeah, and
tiny
it's
people.
embarrassing, and let me tell you, if you have teenagers, you're extra embarrassing, and that is psychological flexibility. It's not that you no longer feel embarrassed or you no longer have those barriers or
Mm.
the "I don't want tos," but you now have the ability to have those barriers show up and remember why it is that I wanna do this, and for everybody, that is gonna be different. For me, I get into perch pose on an airplane because I have scoliosis and I have severe back pain, and I won't be able to sit with my clients the next day, and I wanna be able to be present and be with a client, or I'll walk on a client session because I know for this particular client, that walking and talking really helps with their ADHD so they can actually stay focused on our conversation. So whatever it is.
I see what
Yeah,
you did there. You just answered
yeah,
why. You created a why. I see that. That's so
yeah.
clever.
So one of the things you guys have talked about multiple times, but I just want to double click on is that one of the things people struggle to overcome is this sort of fear of discomfort. And when I hear that, I go immediately to like people don't know how or feel comfortable working hard on exercise. But I imagine that discomfort is massively more expansive than that. And if you could talk a little bit more about that particular barrier, because I do think it's deep and it's, as wide as it is deep when we're talking about discomfort.
Well, I just want to say something about that too, because as Diana said, I have no problem walking 100 miles across the country. I have no problem pushing myself physically to do the workout that I want to do or the training or the competition that I want to do. My discomfort is doing things that I did not choose to do. So an example of how I have used this book myself is like yesterday, my 14-year-old elite soccer player is like, yeah, will you come out and do some shots with me, not alcohol shots, soccer shots. And my first reaction is no, I don't want to do that. And I'm ashamed at how I'm not a skilled soccer player. I didn't have any exposure to athletics, so it puts me in this very vulnerable headspace of like, I suck at this. And yes, my 14-year-old's going to let me know every time that I suck at it. Like this is not, therapist Diana.
Only if you're
Yeah,
lucky.
exactly. Right. So he's going to tell me that I'm terrible about it. And 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 also it's not the type of movement that I like to do. I have the movements that I feel comfortable doing, and this is not one of them. Having someone shoot soccer balls at you. And then there's multiple skills that I have gathered from just the editing process of going back and forth in this book. And I was like, well, can we start with an exercise ball, not a soccer ball? Because I feel less threatened by an exercise ball flying at my head. And I just need to temper that physical. I need to be hit by something a little less flexible. And can you dial it down, aggro, dude, just a little bit? And also, instead of criticizing me, how about coaching me? And can you give me what I can do better with each one?
Love
And
this.
man, and he flipped. And also this, this leg is really hard for me. This I feel like a little vulnerable with this old injury I have, doing this type of movement that's not slow and controlled in the way that I like to do my movement. And it was so positive. I mean, it was an hour-long session, but I had to figure out what was actually bothering me. Like, I'm embarrassed, I don't like being yelled at, whatever, all the things. And I could ask for them to be a little bit different. And he wants me out there. He already said so, because he said, "Would you come do this with me?" And then, okay, and I get to take shots on you. Okay, now let's bring out the soccer ball. All right, now just dial it down a little bit more, because it's, and by working through the discomforts stepwise, which is a lot of what we do in this book, is saying, how do you take this whole situation is uncomfortable. It's alerting me to all the reasons I don't want to do it. And I'm Katy Bowman. I love movement. I got people crouching in airplanes and throwing things overhead in airports. But I have plenty of spaces where movement is not the option for me, because it makes me uncomfortable. So I just work through these steps like everyone else does. And lo and behold, it was a great time. And I'm becoming a better soccer player.
I want
Love that.
that was my question, was like, how have you evolved I mean, you are a goat in this space. You're one of the masters in this space. One of the things that you kind of hinted at is doing things that you're not very good at, because it really does confront all of your limitations.
Yeah.
I have this identity. I'm a 51-year-old man. I'm really good at these 5 things. And if I step out, one of the things that happened to me about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, is that when we started working with more and more elite players and more elite athletes, I was always the worst person in the room and always invited to come play. And there was no shame in being the fattest and the slowest and the biggest and the jackedest and the strongest and the weakest. And it happens to me all the time, where I really had a chance to confront my ego on these things and try to become curious and see if I could do this. One of the skills that I want everyone to take who's a coach here is I don't think a lot of our movement experts are very vulnerable anymore. They don't make themselves vulnerable. I am the queen of my domain. I own this space. You're coming to my space. I try to get coaches to work out with other coaches, and I'm like, you need to shut up and do whatever Diana says. And she's running the show today, and you're going to go. And if we're doing yoga, we're doing Pilates, we're doing something that you do, we're doing dance. I don't care. We're Olympic lifting. Go be a beginner and confront all those things. I think we have to have regular exposure to all of the things you're talking about in the book. And part of one reason we're exercising, and I know why people like CrossFit, because initially they make all these gains and then it's just step aerobics with weights. And I know why you like Iyengar, because you memorize Bikram, you have the 10 steps. I know what comes next. I can practice these things and I don't end up looking like a fool. And I think we need more opportunity to look like
Not
fools.
only that, when you allow yourself to look like a fool when you're in expert status, people like you a little more. I mean, did you like Katie less or more from hearing her soccer story? You liked her a
Way
little
more.
more, because
Yeah.
we're all like, "Well, we can't be like Katy Bowman. She's, like, sleeping without a pillow. I'm sorry, I'm keeping my pillow." But when you hear her tell the story of
She just sleeps on a board every
Or
night.
a
That's what
bed of
we
nails,
think.
everybody,
yeah,
a bed of
that's what she
nails.
Bed
prefers.
of
But when you
nails.
hear about the soccer story, all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, wait, so if she's experiencing that,
Yeah,
then
that's
I can
right.
experience in that." And self-compassion is one component of 3 forms of compassion. There's self-compassion, but there's also compassion for other. When you have compassion for other and compassion for yourself, we're in a flow. And when you allow others, the third form is receiving compassion. Katie allowed herself to receive some compassion from her son. And in order to do that, to get help from her son, to get him to coach her, she had to show some vulnerability. And she's an authority in that dynamic, right? So that's the power of this, that all of a sudden we're strengthening our relationships. We're showing our
Mm.
vulnerability, but people like us a little bit more. And it's kind of, we put up our walls, we put up our expertise because we think that that's what people like. I've been in practice for over 20 years, and I am in love with my clients because it's a space where they're not doing that. They're showing something else.
What is the TV show Couples Therapy?
Yeah, that's a great show.
Where you watch couples therapy and then you were like, okay, I'm going to be a better partner.
Exactly.
You literally walk out of there. Do you think people are clever? And I know people are clever. Are they clever enough to realize that we're not talking about exercise here, that we're talking about applying using this as a model and a catalyst to actually you learn and use those lessons in other aspects of my life? Because I really do sometimes, when I teach a skill, for example, I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this skill, and then I apply it to a new novel task. And if I don't connect the skills, they are discrete, like individual units existing in time and space. I'm like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, and then I do this thing over here, and people just black out and they forgot what we just did for the last 30 minutes. But if I say to them, hey, we're gonna apply this skill to this new skill, then they get it and they transfer that skill over. This really is a book about having more meaningful relationships and confronting and being a better parent and being better at work and confronting all the reasons that we're fearful. Do people get that that's really, you've written a subversive book here? It's super subversive.
I think it is. I mean, urge surfing is this one psychological tool that shows up in I keep wanting to pick up my phone and I can't get off my phone. And that's sort of my barrier to take the morning walk that I said I was going to do. So
Mm.
Diana is laying out this really wonderful process of urge surfing. You got to ride the wave of that feeling. Like you just got to go do the thing that you've already decided is interfering with this other thing that you want to do that will have better payoff. And I have found myself since learning that using urge surfing in all other domains of my life. I did not need to learn urge surfing as it related to movement. I got the concept. I feel this desire to go do this other thing that's taking me away from some other need in my life. So I think I don't know if they'll figure it out, but I think I don't know that they won't figure it out either. I think it's just that once you start seeing the story that's laid out, you can be like, I'm also like this around going to bed early. I'm also I can see what a story in my head is like. You had another one, Diana, about an anchor. You get this bit of information that you read or heard or some friend told you, and it acts like an anchor, and you don't have any real experience with the situation, but you've got this anchor thought, and you make all decisions from this anchor thought. And I've noticed all sorts of anchor thoughts in my head that have nothing to do with movement. So yeah, I think it's a sneak attack. I
I
do.
love it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I would love to better understand urge surfing, and especially because my next question was going to be about technology anyway. And I think, everybody's talking about teenagers and technology and social media, and what we're not talking about is we are all equally as addicted, if not more, and being terrible examples to our kids. And I would include ourselves in that mix as well. And we can always couch it as, oh, it's our work, but I think that is often a bad and not true excuse. But how, let's take technology, right? It's so nice to like sit on your phone in bed and surf the internet for an hour in the morning versus getting up and going to do a walk. Like does urge surfing like self-compassionately saying I'm going to sit in bed and look at my
Oh,
phone,
no.
or what? Tell me how that works. I didn't really understand.
Urge surfing is surfing the urge to do something without acting on it. It comes from smoking research from Alan Marlott. And what they taught in the smoking studies was having people notice the urge to smoke, like you want to go pick up the cigarette. And the nature of an urge is it starts to rise and get stronger and stronger and stronger. So if you can imagine, okay, I want to go grab my phone, or I want to stay on this phone a little bit longer, that urge increases. But we think it's just going to exponentially keep on going up and up and up. So we give into it, right? We give into it when it's kind of getting towards its peak. Urge surfing is riding it all the way out so it comes back down again, whether that's the urge to pick up your phone or the urge to go to the fridge and get something and the urge to smoke a cigarette. This is just addiction research, right? Addictions are addictions to some degree in terms of our dopamine system. And what you find is that if you surf that urge enough, two things will happen. One, you'll get better at surfing. You'll get better at tolerating that kind of itchy feeling without scratching it. It's like poison oak. You can scratch it.
You're saying don't eat the whole cake, but recognize that my brain is telling me to eat the whole
Yeah.
cake.
And then
But just
surf it
wait a
out until
second.
you
Yeah,
stop
Surf it out.
thinking
relax
about it. I
around it
love
like a
that.
surfer would.
Yep.
Feel the wave of it, be in it, observe it, but don't give into it, right? So you'll get better at surfing if you practice. You can get better at any kind of internal discomfort or being with discomfort. But then the other thing is that actually every time you give in, what you're doing is, I mean, Anna Lemke talks a lot about this in terms of the dopamine system, is that you are actually strengthening that urge connection. So the urge gets stronger
That's right.
faster sooner, right? We've all experienced this with technology. And how many I mean, it's not just on our phone. I don't just see it on the phones. I see people on their phones at the gym. They're like sitting on the weight bench with the weights there. And I'm like, how long is your workout going to take you? Because you're on your phone for 50% of the time now, right? It is everywhere, right? You're waiting for a parking spot and their lights are on. You're like, can you get out of the parking spot so I can get in and get to the gym? Right. So if you can learn to,
Ooh, deep cut. That's real.
yeah, no kidding. So if we can
Relate.
learn to be able to do that, we can surf the urge. I'm not going to pick up the phone. My kid just walked in, or I'm not going to pick up the phone until after I'm done with this, whatever, this rep or this walk or whatever it is. So I'm not going to stop on my or go or another thing I see people doing is running and scrolling or biking and these things that hard to say.
I love that. We are just about to apply urge surfing to like 10,000 places
Yes.
in our life. I'm really excited about that. I think it's such a cool concept. There's like 5,000 ways that
It's totally
we
true. Look, this thing is great. I'm so thrilled. And Katie, I'm so glad that, I sometimes I'll talk about my friend who again was just recently on Huberman, and his whole life of uh, coaching. He's one of the best coaches in the world, has been reduced to skipping. He's like, people are like, oh yeah, that whole podcast about skipping. I was like, that wasn't a podcast about skipping. He mentioned skipping for 2 seconds. Now he's the skipping guy. um, you know, I love if people understood, and it's hard for them. They snap into Katy Bowman land, and you really are so competent and so adept at talking about so many aspects of our movement selves. This piece is part of it. It really is the brain. This is, I feel like, a big keystone that's been sort of missing from your body of work. And I'm really so pleased that the both of you have teamed up. The next thing, though, is there's got to be some courses on this. There's got to be like workshops. Tell us more, because I really feel like you've delved into a really important aspect of our human psyches, using this as sort of a lever. But there's not, as you said earlier, Diana, there's not a lot like this out there right now.
No, I think this is what's been missing. I think whether it's through public health or personal training, coaching, even therapeutics is what are the psychological reasons that someone cannot take that dose of movement medicine.
That's
And
right.
so
It is a public health
it is
issue, isn't
totally
it?
a public health issue because we have not gone beyond it's good for you. It's really, really good for you. No, wait, it's really, really, really good for you. Citation,
Right.
citation,
Right.
citation. Like we just keep flexing the same muscle harder instead of recognizing that um, uptaking behavior is a very complex phenomenon. And before you can even get your physical muscles going, your mental muscle has got to maybe learn how to flex. So this sort of moves up to the first book of the canon of the rest of them, and that's why Diana is so I think integral is because she has this wonderful ACT training, which is such a I love ACT and that psychological flexibility lens of psychology, but plus the practical movement stuff that people need to be able to fit it into their lives.
And we're all in our silos, right? So for me as a
Mhm.
psychologist, in the world of psychology, they're just getting onto the idea that maybe movement really could really help with your depression and anxiety, right? And there's, like, so much research in that, right? Or maybe movement is the thing, the missing ingredient in terms of your overall health and well-being. And so, I train therapists. That's one of the, practices that I do. I'm presenting at a huge conference, a world conference this summer in New Orleans, and I'm presenting on, I know I should exercise, but, and these are all therapists that are now thinking about, oh, wait, we do have a set of skills that we've been applying to anxiety and depression and a career and relationships. These skills could also support our clients in moving. And oh, wait, maybe movement is the key. Nutrition is the key that we haven't unlocked in the psychological world. So that's what's exciting to me is when we have this sort of cross-pollination of disciplines and ideas, and I get to learn from Katy. And Katy, we're in a much more, I think, integrative and network based sort of systems model when we do this type of work, when we integrate psychology and movement and nutrition and all the things that the two of you do as well. And yeah, it's also exciting, I think, at this point in our careers to keep learning and keep growing, and that frontier is never ending when we collaborate on things.
I just want to add that I think this is so important. We really are in this era of way too much information and not enough implementation. And this is like implementation times 5,000. But what I love about it is it's so practical and relatable. All you have to do is, like Kelly did, was thumbing through this and thinking, oh, okay, I'm elite. And then realizing that there are 10 chapters where he totally related to it. I mean, everything in here is totally relatable, regardless of whether you're an elite athlete or, a brand new mom or whoever you are. So I know you should exercise, but pick up this book, everybody listening to this. And what's next for both of you? What are you excited about?
Well, I'm intrigued to hear. We haven't really talked about, we've done a couple of courses about values, but trying to figure out, how do people learn best? You can read a book, but then some sort of program to help coaches be able to, like, how would I use this as a tool to get ahead of it? How can I get ahead of it a little bit? And I'm not going to write any more books for a while. That's what's in front of me, is not writing any books for a while.
Whatever.
But
Four and 4
there's
years.
probably a kid's book in
Four-
here,
you-
guys.
you-
There's
you've got a streak
probably
going right
kid's
now.
version of this
Yeah,
book.
I can't wait to hear
version,
all
yeah.
of the.
Well, I'm having Irish twins. I have 2 books coming out in the same year. I'm sort of following Katie's footsteps here in terms of
It's contagious.
too much. So I'm working in the area of Wise Effort, which is a book about really about energy and how we're using our energy, finding more regenerative ways of living so that we're putting our energy out into the world that not only benefits us but benefits others, and that doesn't deplete us. And that wise effort is what this book is about, right? It's about how are we using our energy with movement, but we can do that in a lot of other domains with our creativity, with our work, with our communities.
Tell us where we all can follow more of your amazing brains.
Nutritiousmovement.com and on all the socials. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
I'm at drdianahill.com, and that's the same on all my socials too.
Well, thank you very,
Thank
very
you both
much.
so much.
And once again, congratulations and kudos for just seeing a stinking hole in the world that we all been stepping over and being like, okay, we'll fill it.
Thank
It's
you so
really
much
great.
for being here, both
Thank
of you.
too.